said there in the narration, 80% of people who come to a congregation or church for the first time have been invited by someone. Word of mouth is still the most powerful thing. So whether it's in person, face-to-face, or Facebook, just reach out to someone you think would resonate with the Unity message. And remember, we've got those business cards printed out. They're out there in the credenza and next to the prayer box. So make sure you carry a couple of those with you at all times. And I'm still open, Carla and I, as far as, if you want to get together for dinner, invite us over for dinner, or if you want to just come by during the week, during my office hours, I'd be glad to have a chance to talk with you. So, good morning. I want to tell you about a woman named Kathy. She was blessed with the birth of a son years ago. His name is Joey. When Joey was born, though, he had clubbed feet, where the feet are kind of turned inward. And she was a little put off by that, but the doctor said, don't worry, we've got a treatment regimen, we're using braces to kind of reform them, and then when he's a little older, we can do a surgery. And, he came through all of that. But Kathy followed, the unity principles. So she decided to, okay, God, show me the good in this, and to always be positive about the situation rather than making Joey feel less than, fill in the blank. So by the time Joey was 7, he was walking normally. And the doctor said, hey, that's great, but don't expect him to do a lot of running. Well, Kathy kind of chuckled because he was already running all over the place, as any 7-year-old boy would do. And so he, play with the kids in the neighborhood. And then, as he got older, she had an interesting challenge come forward. He was in 7th grade, and he came forward and said, oh, Mom, I've got this great idea. I said, I was talking to my friends at school, and they introduced me to the coach. I'm going to go out for the cross-country team. Well, cross-country team, if you're not familiar with it, it's a team of kids who will run long distances. The shortest routes are usually about 2.5 miles, the longest one's 7.5 miles. And it's a type of team sport. So say my school, might field, like 4 to 7 runners, and other schools who do that too. And you're ranked by, you get points by rank as far as who finishes first, second, third, fourth, and so they total it up, and the team with the most points win. But she's kind of like, oh, the doctor said, but she thought, well, no, if this is what he wants to do, great. And then she found out that the team's coach would have the boys run together, or I should say boys, but it could have been girls too, just running together to practice. And it got to be the first tryout day. Joey wakes up in the morning with 103 fever. And she's like, oh, Joey, I don't know if you should go to school today. He goes, no, I have to go to school. I got tryouts this afternoon. So she, let him go to school, and she's expecting maybe a phone call from a nurse or something like that. No call. Afternoon comes around, she goes, well, the least I could do is, maybe go to school and pick him up when he's done with his cross-country tryout. And as she's driving along, who does she see up along on the side running in one park? Is Joey. So she pulls up, opens up the window, says, Joey, you okay? He goes, yeah, I'm okay. He goes, you want to ride? No, I've still got 2 miles to do, Mom. So she went over to the school. When he was done, drove him home. And a week later, it was announced who were the 7 finalists on the team, who the 7 top runners got picked. He was number 6. And the thing that was so amazing to Kathy was that of the 7 runners who were picked, 6 of them were 8th graders, and here was Joey, a 7th grader. And he went on to really enjoy cross country. But what a wonderful way to approach it. Why would we treat somebody differently? I know when Carla and I arrived at Unity of Indianapolis to serve there, back in 2011, I met a woman who had a condition called ataxia. If you're not familiar with it, it's very much like Lou Gehrig's disease. And, I was with her, and I was like, oh, wow. And she looks at me and says, hey, don't pity me. I'm doing fine. And it was a good reminder to me of like, yeah, you're right. I should be seeing the Christ in you and all of that. It was just a good reminder, but a lot of us fall into that trap. So, I find that it's easier for us to see God in another person than in ourselves. I think that's why we're put here together, so that we can see that Christ consciousness in other people, and they can see it in us. And by that, we lift each other up. We have a choice of whether we're going to be a millstone or a milestone in a person's life. If we are divinely guided and we feel a passion, and each of us have been given special passions or gifts, passions, or talents, as I usually say, spiritual gifts, divine purpose for us to express in the world, whatever it is that we're good at, whatever it is that just the energy just flows when we do it because we love doing it so much. The Bible often talks about something called the way. The way. And obviously the title today is Show Me the Way. In the years after the resurrection during the first century, Jesus' disciples or anyone who followed Jesus' teachings were called the followers of the way. Gospel of John, 14th chapter, starting with the 4th verse. Jesus says to the apostles, "And you know the way where I am going?" And Thomas said to him, "Lord, we do not know where you are going. How can you say that we know the way?" Jesus responded, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but by me. If you had known me, you would have known my Father also. Henceforth you know him and have seen him." I remember, growing up as a kid, and I went to Catholic grammar school, and we were taught, that Jesus was God. Well, it turns out it's a lot deeper than that. In fact, in these middle verses in the Gospel of John, they're nicknamed to Bible scholars the discourses of Jesus. And as you read them, it's just astonishing about how you'll read stuff and you understand the words that are in the sentence, but the sentence as a whole makes no sense. And that's because there seems to be just kind of a graduated sense of human, divine guidance that comes over time. You might read it when, say, you're in your 20s, but then suddenly in your 30s or 40s, you're finding some of those sentences begin to make sense. So as we build a higher consciousness, we understand these words. But what is pointed out in many of the seminaries is that what happens here, especially in the Gospel of John, because there's so much symbolism of it, is that during this section of the Gospel of John, Jesus is expressing the God consciousness of all of us. So he's not talking about just him himself. He's talking about how we can all feel that oneness with God. The other interesting thing is the 7th verse. He says, "If you've known me, you would have known the Father also. Henceforth you know him and have seen him." Back in those biblical times, according to Jewish law, it was assumed that sons would go into the father's business. And that's why, even though nowhere in the Bible does it really say that, or at least in the Gospels, that Jesus is a carpenter, it's assumed because it's told early on that Joseph, his father, was a carpenter. So he must have been a carpenter, is the general assumption. And if the son is in town, when the father isn't, he's allowed to be a fully authorized representative of the father's business. So you could cut a deal with the son. And that's, of course, the old tradition of, don't sully the family name. Yeah, it's because, you have the opportunity to say yes or no in a situation like that. Or, no, I need to talk to Dad about this a little bit more. Or just cut a deal with somebody. So much was done in that way back then. So the way of Jesus is the ways that Jesus taught us to behave. His teachings are for us. Do we truly live the way of God? In the way we do business, in the way we treat fellow congregants, in the way we treat our family and friends, in the way we treat strangers on the street? Are we truthful with each other? Are we truly seeing the divine nature in each other? So do you follow the way, or are you in the way? I've gotten a lot better at that over the years. Do you believe that others, when they say, no, you can't do that, Or do you find yourself saying, well, I probably shouldn't do that? Whatever we focus on expands. And as I mentioned before, we get this guidance to our intuition of our gifts, passions, and talents. And if sometimes we've got a passing whim that just comes and goes away, but if there's something that just seems to be there all the time, a desire, say you want to write the next great American novel. Oh, I'm probably not good enough to do that. I shouldn't do that. Well, here you are. You're tearing yourself down. And it's interesting that when we get guidance and we start to move forward on something, that suddenly this resistance rises. And what it is it's anything within our mind or in our beliefs that may be in opposition to what it is that we're setting out to do surfaces. And sometimes they surface in other people coming to us and saying, nah. But if you know in your heart, in your gut, in your intuition that, yeah, this is what I need to do, then go for it. Go for it. Carla and I, it's odd, we've been here now just a few months, and we've yet to be to the beach. But as I shared, back in 2013 in January, actually it was 2014, now I think about it, in January, Carla and I came down here for, vacation. We were over there in Madeira Beach, spent a week there just relaxing, and, of course the waves, come in and they go out, and it's funny watching, say, the birds and stuff like that, the wave will come in and they'll scampering away from it, and then the wave goes back out. That's one way of observing waves, but then we can also be wave makers, here in the physical world. Of course, the proverbial devil's advocate. I know another minister had shared with me about how he had a new board member named George. And George always seemed to take the contrary view in the meetings. It seems like there'd be 6 of them, they'd take a vote, and all those in favor, aye. All those opposed, nay. Sure enough, George would be the one, that would always be saying nay. And one of the other board members said, well, we just had a discussion about this, George. Why are you voting nay? He says, well, I just hate to see a one-sided vote. In other words, he was kind of a muckraker. And the minister at first, it kind of troubled him, but then he thought, well, wait a minute here. Earlier in my life, I was a muckraker, so that's probably why he's annoying me, because he's showing me once again an aspect of myself that I've been able to rise above. And so, he's just started to express love to George, just allowing that love to radiate from him. Rather than looking down on him, he saw him in a greater mode. But many times the person who's blocking us the most is ourselves. We have that inner dialogue that happens, that doubt. And it's interesting because I was just dealing with a situation here this week. And this morning when I woke up, I kind of was like, well, no, I've been feeling moved to do that, but I'm probably not going to do it. And I'll be darned, out of the mouth of babes, as I say, someone who I came in and was greeting said something that gave me the message that, oh yeah, you've got to go do this. And that's the way it happens sometimes. We pray to God, we're waiting for an answer. We want, if you've watched Stephen Colbert, occasionally they'll look up at the ceiling and there'll be God up there talking to them. It's usually a humorous routine, but, you're waiting for the Hollywood God to answer, and that's not the way it happens. It comes to us through our intuition, or we'll put out a thought or an idea or a question, and sure enough, somebody just walks, into our lives and gives us the answer. Or we'll be listening to the radio or the TV, and sure enough, wow, there's the answer. That's the way God works. So, let me give you a couple guidelines for finding our way through the way. Fear less, hope more. Complain less, breathe more. Talk less, say more. Hate less, love more. And all good things are yours. I've got a poem here from that prolific writer, Anonymous. It's called The Wrecking Crew. I stood on the streets of a busy town, watching men tear a building down. With a heave-ho and a loud yell, They swung a ball, and a section fell. I asked the foreman, "Are those men as skilled as those you'd hire if you wanted to build?" "No way," he said. "No, indeed. Just unskilled labor is all I need. I can tear down as much in a day or two as it would take skilled men a year to do." And then I thought, as I went on my way, which of these two roles do I choose to play? Do I walk life's road with love and care, striving to build, encourage, and share? Or am I one who roams the town, content with merely tearing down? Earlier I mentioned George, the board member and what the minister shared with me was that once he let go of the frustration with George, he watched a transformation happen. George really started applying the spiritual principles, and as anyone who has served on the board knows, the hidden curriculum of being on the board is that it accelerates your spiritual growth. Because you're dealing with people like George or other situations, that come up. And it really teaches that sense of, can I truly express, unconditional love? Can I be open, and receptive to God's living spirit of truth in whatever the situation is? So, rather than being a wave maker, George became a way maker. I'm going to have Duncan put up a slide here for the next few minutes. And let's go over a couple things you can remember. Of course, I got it printed in the bulletin this week. I actually got my act together and got it to Leanne early enough to get it printed in the bulletin. I'm always working on a talk even into Saturday night. All right, so love. If you consider a chair a good solid foundation to sit on, love be the first one. Love is just being willing to open our heart, and let that love pour out. Isn't it fascinating how we have this endless supply of love that comes into us and through us? It's a bridge builder, to personal relationships, business relationships, building bridges rather than burning them down. The second leg is trust. I've noticed, especially over these last couple years, how many times people are rationalizing that you should start by not trusting. We look at all the debates we're having politically and all. But I have found over time that it is wise to always start by trusting. I trust a person, I trust an organization, until they maybe give me an indication that I shouldn't trust them anymore, or at least trust but verify. The third leg is respect. Obviously, if you're loving people, can you also respect them? Seeing them as equal. I know when I was playing football, back in grammar school and high school and college, one realization I had at one point was that, rather than feel inferior or superior to my opponent, can I look at them as just being equals and that we're competing on a level playing field, literally? It kind of changed the way that I played football at the time. And I think you'll see it changes your way as you play life. But the respect for others, but also the respect for ourselves. So many of us have the challenge of feeling unworthy or inadequate, and no, I have to have respect for myself as well. And then the fourth leg is to promote. One of the great gifts we're giving is to be the cheerleader for others. One of the best gifts, one of the best pieces of advice I got is when you help other people achieve their goals, you'll get the most satisfaction in life. And I look at that as one of my major roles as a minister. And when I do meet with people like one-on-one or at dinner and stuff like that, well, at the end I'll ask, is there anything else I can do to help you? Can you think of any way I can help you? And just, allow for serendipity to maybe them saying something. It's like, well, I know somebody who might be able to help you on that, or I could help you on that. It opens up that dialogue. So, those are the four legs that I think would be a strong foundation for any life. In the Gospel of Mark, 9th chapter, 33rd verse, the disciples are traveling through Galilee. And it says, they came to the city of Capernaum, and when Jesus was in the house, he asked them, "What were the 12 of you arguing about along the way?" They all fell silent, looking at each other. For on the way they had argued about which of the 12 was greatest. Jesus sat down, called the 12, and said to them, "Whoever wants to be first must be last, must be the servant of all." Yeah, there is a humility that comes with serving other people. Not expecting anything in return, but know that anything you put out into the universe is going to come back to you multiplied. It might not come through that very person. Now that I'm getting of a more mature age, I start to see that. People who were just so kind and helped me when I was young, and I couldn't repay them, including my parents. But I have the opportunity now to pay it forward, to begin to be kind to other people, find a way to help. So, unless you're an oldie child, you probably experienced sibling rivalry like our 12 apostles. But remember that the 12 apostles represent aspects of ourselves. And sometimes we can start to play that game with, what are our gifts or our committee of 12, in the back of the mind arguing over a particular situation. They're all equal. They're all useful. So Jesus, I think, was saying, let's build each other up. Be the way for each other, not the wall to another. Love, trust, respect, promote the way, the truth, and the life. Practicing our spiritual best rather than our human worst. In the book 5 Steps to Success by Leo Hauser, he tells the story of a baseball pitcher named Jim Kaat. His last name is spelled K-A-A-T. Remarkable pitcher and a long career, longer than most pitchers. He started in 1959 and retired after the 1983 season. In 1966, he was playing for the Minnesota Twins. And before the season, the pitchers and catchers report early for, about a week earlier than the rest of the thing. And they had hired a new pitching coach. His name was Johnny Sane. And Kaat was real excited because he was one of the best pitching coaches out there. And so he's thinking, oh, great, I'll get some tips on, how to work on the stuff that I don't do very well. Maybe he can teach me some new pitches. And so during that first week, Johnny was just doing a lot of observing, and then he did a one-on-one, in his office with each of the players. And so Jim Kaat comes in, and Johnny says to him, "Jim, what are your 4 best pitches?" And Jim said, "Well, my best pitch is my fastball. Then I'd say my curveball, then my slider, and then my changeup." And Johnny said, "Well, what do you spend the majority of your time practicing?" He goes, "Well, I work on the ones that need the work. I work on my changeup, I work on my slider." And Johnny sat silently for a few moments, and he said, "Jim, here's what I want you to do, and listen real carefully, because if you do this, you're going to win a lot of games this year. I want you to practice your fastball 80% of the time. Whether you're practicing, whether we're doing warm-ups for a game, 80% of your time focus on the fastball. The other 20% you can devote to those other pitches." And Jim left at first, and he's like, well, that's not what I expected, but this guy is supposed to be one of the best, so I'm going to do what he says I should do. Well, that year in 1966, Jim Kaat won more baseball games than any other pitcher in either league. He won 25 games. He was the American League Pitcher of the Year. Conventional wisdom tells us we need to practice what we're not good at. But it's also important for us to look at what we are good at. We need to, the lumberjack discovers that taking a time to pause and sharpen his saw makes his job a lot easier. So are we sharpening things that we do well? Now, the very fact that you're here in a Unity Church, and as I look into each of your eyes and each of your souls, what I see is that you're all good at love. So for this week, would you put in the forefront of your mind expressing love with everyone you encounter? You're already good at it, but you're going to get a lot better. Our closing story is from Steve Hartman of the CBS Evening News about a woman who practiced love.
A few months ago, here at Freighter Hospital in Milwaukee, Nurse Lynn Bartos took a long, hard look back on her career. After 44 years of sacrifice and devotion, she wondered, was it worth it?
I invested a lot of myself into being a really good nurse, and did it really make a difference?
She got her answer when she became the patient.
Lynn?
Lynn has rheumatoid arthritis, and last summer, during one of her doctor's visits, she was treated by a new nurse named Nicole Cran, who seemed strangely familiar.
Just something on her face and her eyes, I thought I knew who she was.
Do you still get goosebumps when you think about it?
I do. I have goosebumps right now.
Lynn first met Nicole 28 years earlier, back when they both shared the cover of Children's Nurse magazine. It was an article about Lynn and the special relationship she had with Nicole, her patient at the time.
She was a very lovable little girl.
Nicole, with that whale spout of a ponytail, had a life-threatening intestinal problem. And Lynn, or Sweet Linny, as Nicole used to call her, spent years nursing her back to health. But that was then.
Nicole was this little girl that I took care of, and now she's taking such good care of me.
Nicole says she doesn't remember much from those days. But here's what's interesting. She also doesn't remember a time when she didn't want to be a nurse.
Oh yeah, I always wanted to help people, and I don't remember if I really just liked nurses. I just knew I always wanted to be one.
For as long as she can remember, she always wanted to be one. Some might say that's a coincidence, but to Lynn, it's a godsend.
This is just what I needed. It is definitely a gift, because now I know for 44 years I made a difference in people's lives.
44 years, and maybe generations to come.
Yeah.
Steve Hartman, on the road in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
That's pretty good.